This is meeting number 142 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for Thursday, June 6, 2019. We are here this morning in consideration of the Main Estimates 2019, Vote 1 under the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. Once we have finished our review of the main estimates, we will move in camera to discuss the legacy report. I hope that everyone brought a copy of their report with them. We want to get down to that more next week as well, but should we get to that before that, we want to look at it, and I know there's a few people that have said that they want a few minor things. So where we left off last week was with Mr. Christofferson and debate on his motion, and he had introduced it and was speaking to it, so we cede the floor back to Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that, and I applaud your optimism about getting to reports. If I recall correctly, I think I left off. I was trying to figure out and think out loud reasons why the government would do what they've done. And a reminder, what they've done is unique in Canadian history in that we have never, ever, ever had an Auditor General say to Parliament, I do not have sufficient funds to carry out my work plan. Those words have never been uttered before in Canadian history. And as much as the minister, and it's heartbreaking to see, the minister try to make this about 2011, when 2011 at best is a talking point. At best, the argument the minister has is, well, wait a minute, you're accusing us of an awful thing, cutting the budget of the Auditor General. The Conservatives, when they were in power in 2011, they were much worse. That's their best argument, is that they did it too. Which, first of all, is not true. And if I have any credibility in this place, I'm willing to spend some of it, believe it or not, defending the Conservatives to the extent that what is going on now is completely apples and oranges from what went on in 2011. And I know because not only was I here, I was the chair of the committee. And it really is heartbreaking when you think about what's at stake here. I mean, this is not games. This is not bean counting. This is not boring accounting stuff that really doesn't matter to anybody or have any relevancy to the real world. We're talking about, for instance, an audit that the Auditor General planned for next year on cybersecurity, and they've had to rip that out of their work plan because they don't have enough money. And that has never happened in Canadian history. And so for the minister to stand up and say that this is what this is really all about is whether or not the Liberals are as bad and evil from an auditing point of view as the Conservatives were. That's not the issue. And since I happen to have a little bit of time, I thought what I might do, Chair, to help put this to bed, because it's, again, you know, it's heartbreaking, but we need to wrestle this false argument to the ground and get it out of the way so that we're actually talking about what matters, which is the Auditor General's work plan for next year, not what the previous government did 8 years ago. But since the Liberals seem to want to spend time there, I'll gladly spend some time explaining why I'm prepared to put my credibility on the line to say they are not comparable. And I want to say again how much I absolutely resent the minister, a federal minister of the Crown, standing up and attacking a member of the House who I stand here totally vulnerable, ready to be challenged. But I do not attack people personally. I didn't do it for the 15 years I was here. I didn't do it the 13 years I was at Queen's Park. And I didn't do it the 5 years I was sitting on city and regional councils in Hamilton. And yet, there I was sitting, listening to a minister attack me. And not only attack me on something, you know, that was kind of made up out of thin air. Attack me on my job, the questioning my integrity on this committee when I was the chair. And nothing matters more to me other than my constituents than the work of the Auditor General and proper oversight in this Parliament. That is where my passion is. That's where my heart is. And it's really disappointing to see that the best the minister can do to defend against the indefensible is to attack another member of Parliament. And quite frankly, I'm surprised because I know Joyce well. You and I have traveled with her, Chair. We have broken bread together. We've fought, we've had our arguments, but we always kept it in the context of parliamentary collegiality, respect, and an understanding that we're all here to do the same job. And I thought that's the relationship that we had. So even on a personal level. But what it points to is the scarcity of a legitimate response. When you don't have an argument, you do two things. You get louder, which I know because I've done that.
Totally believe it.
Yeah, so my colleagues, they can believe that. It's not hard to believe that I would be like that. Listen, what I want to do is I want to read into the record a letter addressed to me as the chair from Mr. Wiersma, who was at the time the interim Auditor General. And that was between the era of Sheila Fraser and Michael Ferguson. Mr. Wiersma was the interim Auditor General. He's a great auditor, a great guy too. Just I could, for the record, he was just a real prince of an individual. So it's addressed to me, and it's from the Auditor General. It's on their letterhead. It's dated October 26th, 2011. Addressed to me as Chair of the Public Accounts Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Dear Mr. Christofferson, in July 2011, officers of Parliament received letters from their respective ministers strongly encouraging them to adhere to the spirit and intent of the government's strategic and operating review, one of the steps in the government's efforts to achieve fiscal savings of at least $4 billion by the 2014-15 fiscal year. My office recognizes the seriousness of the current economic circumstances facing Canada and all Canadians. In my response to Minister Flaherty, dated 2 August 2011, I committed to undertake a review of my office and present the results to the parliamentary panel on the funding and oversight of officers of Parliament and to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. I am writing to you in your capacity as the chair of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts to advise you of our proposal that is the result of our strategic and operating review and to request a meeting with the committee to discuss it at your earliest convenience. I am writing to the chair of the parliamentary panel on funding and oversight of officers of Parliament with a similar request. We have undertaken a thorough and comprehensive review of the Office of the Auditor General. The starting point of our review was strategic. We have analyzed all of our legislative audit practices with a view to concentrating our efforts where they will best serve Parliament and territorial legislatures. We believe that all of our work is valuable, some is less critical than others. We have used this review as an opportunity to assess how our limited resources are best deployed based on risk and value. We have also reviewed all of our internal processes and services to identify opportunities for operational efficiencies. Our proposal, outlined below, would result in a reduction of approximately 10% from our current workforce. The impact will be felt across all levels of our organization. We expect to incur expenses for redeployments and retraining, which we have allowed for. We are committed to making these reductions in the most responsible and caring way we can. In total, the reductions will approximate $6.7 million in 2014-15, or 8% of our 2011-12 main estimates of $84.4 million. We are able to implement about $5.3 million of these savings on our own, but will require legislative and executive action to realize about $1.4 million of the total. The proposed savings, including those arising from changes to our territorial work, are summarized in Attachment 1 to this letter. The proposed reductions in our audit work predominantly affect our financial audit practice. This practice has experienced a number of independent, ad hoc, and special mandate requests over the years. The legislative and other changes we are proposing will focus our financial audits on what we believe will be the most important accounting information and the areas of greatest risk. Now, again, Sheriff, I might just parenthetically, financial audits are, of course, the standard audits that most of us understand, where you go in and make sure that the bills are there, where they paid on time, where's the money, just that basic auditing accounting function, versus performance audits, which used to be called value for money audits, which is the focus of our work. We do not review financial audits, but what we do, we accept them because we're part of the mandate, but the actual work that we do and the hearings that we have are on performance audits, which is different. One is, you said you're going to spend $10 million on schools. Let's see the bills and see the checks and see the bank balances and make sure everything's square. Performance audit says you had $10 million to build schools. Did you do it efficiently or not? So the interim auditor general is differentiating at this point in the letter between a financial audit and a performance audit. Again, I'll just repeat that last sentence to tie it in. The legislative and other changes we are proposing will focus our financial audits on what we believe to be the most important accounting information and the areas of greatest risk. The changes will also enable us to achieve greater consistency in our audit effort across federal organizations. For example, consistent with the government's decision not to proceed with audited departmental financial statements, we propose discontinuing our audits of the financial statements of department-like organizations. This will reduce the number of financial audits we conduct by 18. Those organizations with significant public funds would still be subject to examination as part of our annual audit of the summary financial statements of the Government of Canada. In a few cases, the organizations may wish to continue receiving an audit. We would have no objection if they were to engage a private sector auditing firm to do so. We propose to continue our work as the financial auditor of the majority of Crown corporations and agents of Crown corporations and of agents of Parliament, recognizing their unique responsibilities and accountability relationships. The one legislative change we propose outside of our financial audit practice would discontinue our assessments of the performance reports of the Parks Canada Agency, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and the Canadian Revenue Agency. When these agencies were created in the late 1990s to 2003 as a new type of governmental organization, it was seen as valuable to have an independent review of the fairness and reliability of their performance information. Since then, however, we have not been asked to do similar work on performance reports of any other governmental organization, and we can see no reason to continue to single out the agencies for this type of assessment. We believe Parliament requires high-quality performance information from all federal organizations, and therefore we will continue to include performance reporting as a topic for consideration in our performance audit practice. A list of the audits and review engagements that we are proposing to be discontinued is provided in Attachment 2 to this letter. In our special examination of Crown corporations, a type of performance audit, the government implemented a significant change in 2009 when it extended the period between examinations from 5 to 10. 5 to 10 years. Following the government's change, our costs for this work decreased noticeably. We are now focused on distributing the workload more evenly and operating this practice as efficiently as possible. We see no further opportunity to change the nature or extent of our audit effort in this area. The majority of our interaction with Parliament is through our performance audit practice. We conduct audits that examine the efficiency, economy, and environmental impact of all major federal government departments, agencies, and other organizations, and annual government revenues of $237 billion and expenses of some $270 billion. In fiscal year 2008-9, we presented 32 performance audit reports to the House of Commons and territorial legislatures. This compares with the 26 performance audits we issued in our most recent fiscal year after reducing our performance audit practice in response to previous funding pressures and Parliament's capacity to consider our work. Again, parenthetically, the Auditor General came forward on their own and asked if they could be reduced from 3 reports to 2. And their main argument was, in part, the pressure on them to deliver it. But quite frankly, back in those days, we were having a heck of a time on the committee keeping up with the reports. I won't get into the politics, but the dynamics of this committee at that time were not the healthiest in terms of good practice for a public accounts committee. So that led to some of it. But I think history has shown, Chair, that it was probably a wise decision because during this era, I think, I stand to be corrected by you, Chair, but I think we've been able to do just about every chapter, certainly the overwhelming majority, and I think on a number of reports, we did them all. And I can tell you that's night and day compared to the era that we're talking about here when, let's just say, there were dysfunctional ingredients in the work of PAC. I'll just leave it at that. I got enough political fights on my hand without opening up another one, especially on an old battle. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that that did happen, and that so again there have been contractions in the work of the Auditor General, but as you can see, oftentimes it's driven by their own review of their workload, what they need to do, and what can be most effective. And they're also looking at the ability of the committee. Quite frankly, if the committee of this committee, in my opinion, if this committee had been around at that time, that recommendation may not have been made. But I got to tell you, and then Tyler can tell you, he was with me the whole time. We had a heck of a time trying to play. We had like 2 tracks going. We were trying to play catch up on the one track, consistently falling behind, and on the other track, we were trying to do the new ones as they were coming out, and we were falling behind that. And it gets bad because what happens is you're reviewing reports that reflect a hearing that you did 10 months ago, and that hearing was 6 months after the report was tabled. And you're a veteran now of PAC, Chair. You can appreciate that a lot of the effectiveness of this committee is lost. And so I think the Auditor General today looked at that and in combination with their own workload made that recommendation. And I think history has proven that so far that was a good decision because that's just about the right amount of workload that we've been doing. By the way, I remind this committee that average amount of workload is anywhere between 6 and 14 chapters within one report. And right now, the Auditor General, I think, has at most 3 or 4 audits planned. That's out of 2 reports. Where there should be upwards of 20, there's going to be 4. And one of them that's going to be cut is cybersecurity. This is what blows my mind. So,
point of order, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if Mr. Christopherson would accept a question under the rules adopted at PROC where I might be able to make a quick interjection.
The Sims protocol?
The Sims without surrendering the floor, so I could just...
Sure. I was there, and Sims protocol chaired, because I need you to make sure this works, is a member wants to comment or ask a question, not to engage in debate necessarily, although they can try, but more a matter of, hey, on that point, and then that we'll have that little exchange, but that you make sure I get the chair back at the end of it. And it's about a minute or so. That's what we do at
So we have not adopted the Sims protocol. However, if we're I think we'd have to be unanimous in changing a protocol now, wouldn't we? I think we probably would, because otherwise one side could just make the ruling. But if people have a consensus to go that way and give me the ability to give the floor back, if the speaker is open to that, and then I think we can do that. Thank
Yeah,
you, Nick.
it works well for us at Proc. So yeah, please, Mr. Whalen.
First, I'd like to thank Mr. Christopherson for bringing this letter. It points to sort of a situation that actually happened earlier in this Parliament where there were some questions about whistleblower protections and the public sector Disclosure Protection Act and the regime there, and I think there was an audit that was referred to the Operations and Estimates Committee. And I had an opportunity to sit on this committee as a substitute in that transition. I'd also like to thank Mr. Christopherson for all the great work he's done in his time over Parliament. My understanding is that you're not reoffering this time, is that correct?
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for all your great work here. Even right to the bitter end, you're taking the bull by the horns on something that's important to you, and I think that's wonderful. One of the things I'm trying to wrap my head around as you point to this letter, and I agree that the Auditor General manages their workload and the ability of committees to deal with their information very well. I also agree that cybersecurity is an extremely important topic, but there's an interplay, it seems to me, between the budgets of the various officers of Parliament, and it seems that there's been greater reliance or burden shifted to the Auditor General. And I'm wondering what your views are on any legislative changes that might be necessary in order to, for future parliaments, to make sure that there's the right balance between the budgets allocated to the different officers of Parliament, so that maybe the Auditor General could be allocated more, or maybe they wouldn't have to have some type of a matching. And maybe there could be a very quick recommendation to the next Parliament to introduce some legislation to make sure that this gets funded in the next Parliament.
So I want to thank Mr. Whalen. I think that was a response to exactly what Mr. Christopherson was speaking about. Sometimes when we have point of orders, they aren't really point of orders, and they take us away from the discussion that is going on. But thank you, Mr. Whalen. That was actually right down the line of speaking that Mr. Christopherson had. So I'll turn the floor back to Mr. Christopherson.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose, as I thought this through, that's kind of been the safety net that I'm looking at, is that surely to goodness the next Parliament will come in, and when the PAC meets and looks at their workload, which is nothing, they're going to ask the question, why do we exist? And hopefully that would draw some attention to it. But here's my problem, Mr. Whalen, and I do appreciate the nature, and thank you very much for your kind remarks. That is surprising at the end of 3.5 decades. It's nice to hear. I appreciate it. Thank you, especially from colleagues, especially with colleagues I respect. So to me, that's kind of the safety net. But I'm just going to be completely honest with you. Like, this has just destroyed my pre-retirement time. Ever since I announced last July, and I made some reference to this at the last meeting, so I won't go on too long. But one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I used to think about it during my career, was I hope I get a chance to spend, close to a year being an elected person and never have to worry about being reelected. Kind of like being a senator a little bit. And I kind of looked forward to that going, you get these parting shots on the way out the door. And so since last July, I've really, really enjoyed being as more nonpartisan than I've ever been, and I've never been overly nonpartisan. Some would argue, given certain incidents, that may not be true. But in the main, I don't think I'm a fire-breathing partisan, at least not in the latter part of my career. And so I was thoroughly enjoying people in my riding. People were saying, you look so calm. You, Chair, apparently. I wasn't here then, but if I'm paraphrasing your words, but something to the extent that when you announced that you weren't going to run again, having changed your mind, originally thinking that you were good for another term, one of the things you said at this committee was, Christopherson's looking way too relaxed. As if to say there's a life out there that you don't want to see yourself miss. And I was enjoying it. And in fact, when people in my riding would say, you look so, like really, they'd come up, you look so calm. You look look so relaxed. And so to me, it was NSD, New Serene Dave. And so for a year, I've been relatively serene and calm and enjoying it, not seeing partisan lines, only seeing parliamentary colleagues. And then this. And I got to tell you, if this is still the way it is when we rise, I'm not going to leave here with the same bounce in my step. I'm going to feel like I failed because I'm the most senior member of this committee, and I know as well, if not better than anyone, the importance of this work to Parliament, to our reputation in the world as one of the best. I mean, when word gets out that the Liberal government, I mean, when I say word gets out, I mean internationally. We don't see it because they're like librarians. They don't make a lot of noise, but there's a lot of them and they know a lot. There's a whole auditing community and a whole oversight and accountability and transparency community internationally who pay attention to these things. Got to tell you, I won't name them, but I've had responses because we sent out the article that was published in the Hill Times. We sent it out to a few people. You'd be surprised who is really concerned about this, starting with business. The government's going to start hearing from business on this. You don't want to know why? Because not only social democrats like me who believe strongly in transparency and accountability and oversight, the business community that sees themselves as having to carry the burden of taxation, when they see government waste, smoke comes out their ears. It's the one time me and that business community are totally united in conflict. And when the word gets out, and I say to them, especially to my fellow leadership colleagues, the chair and the vice chair, we've traveled internationally. You two know exactly what I'm talking about. When word gets out internationally that the Liberal government, under the fair-haired prime minister that the world adores, that very same prime minister slashed the work plan budget of the Auditor General, it's going to leave a whole lot of people wondering what is going on in Canada. So I guess my answer to my colleague, the direct answer is, yes, this is fixable, but a lot of damage is going to be done. And if it's going to get fixed by the next government, this is the part, because remember, I will come back. I do know where I am, even though I go for a walk around the park. Like that cartoon where the kid goes out to do a quick thing and he ends up going all over. That's the beauty of the committee talking. You don't have to worry about time. As long as the chair is okay with where you are, you're good. So I'll come back to that. But I guess my point on this is, since I was asked the question, why would the government allow this to be potentially become an election issue? Like, of course, the Conservatives, the NDP, the Green, I suspect even the Bloc, are all going to put in their platforms that they will adequately and properly and sufficiently fund the Auditor General. I don't understand why the Liberal, from a political point of view, just looking as an observer, I don't understand why the Liberals would give the opposition parties this gift. And
that might be a great segue for me to make another point of order under the Sims protocol, if it's permitted.
Okay,
Mr.
but
Chair.
Don't interrupt me. I'm in the middle of a good rant.
Oh, I thought it was like
Then we'll have a
you had
different
your boom.
exchange.
I thought you got us good there, so I thought that was a good
I'm
climax.
still, Mr. Christofferson has just moved to the point where he says, now I want to more closely address the fix that Mr. Whalen suggested in his question. So I hate to take a back and forth yet when he's just getting to that. So can I hold off on that, Mr. Whalen? Or is your point of order?
Yeah, sure. My point of order is just that I provided some more precise language that I just wanted Mr. Christofferson to refresh his mind, if he could just take 5 or 10 seconds to read
Sure.
it.
Let me just finish this thought, because I'm just not smart enough to hold it for long. and then I'll have a quick consultation and do that. I'd be glad to do that. No, I was just saying that this is the thing, and again, I'm picking up where I left off yesterday, trying to figure out why is the government doing this? Like, this is what throws me. It's not like you need the 10.8 million. Come on, in this place where we deal with billions. And remember, I used to be the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Finance in Ontario. So again, I know a little bit about these things. It's just, if it's not for the money and the politics suck, there's got to be another reason. And that's why I won't review those in detail again today. I might need a refresher down the road, but today we're okay. And I had pointed out, Chair, that I thought that one of the motivators might be the government was really worried about what a cybersecurity audit would show, especially since I was here the last time we had one, and it was scary. So is the government of the day so, first of all, arrogant enough to believe that they're going to be the government, and therefore they should axe this now because it's going to give them all kinds of pain? And is the political calculation that it will be such a horrific audit, you know, of the dimensions of the sponsorship scandal or the F-35 debacle, or worse, because it deals with security? Would it be so bad that it was worth paying this price, because there's a price to be paid? Myself and the other opposition members are doing everything we can to try to get some attention to this, because it's only, at the end of the day, I mean, I've been around long enough. The only thing that's really going to change this is when emails and texts and phone calls start coming into individual Liberal members' offices. And then they're going to be turning at their next caucus meeting going, why do I have this problem for $10.8 million on the Mother Teresa Department of Parliament? Why do I have this problem? Liberal backbenchers will be asking. And so again, and then the other thing I thought was, well, is this retaliation? Because when we're going to talk about this big time, and to her credit, Vice Chair Mendez has been strong about looking at the long term to making sure that we change the process of funding so that we don't have what we have right now. But what we do have right now is that the very people that the auditor audits, and recently came out with a couple of reports that didn't make these folks look very good, they're the same folks they had to negotiate with. So is this retaliation? Which would be so horrifically unacceptable from any government. But I got to tell you, there'd be an added sting coming from one that got elected on a mandate of respecting Parliament. Is that what this is? Is retaliation? Are we that kind of a banana republic that when an oversight body makes the powerful government of the day look bad, they're going to pay a price? Is that what happened? Again, I find both of those things like just mind-boggling, Chair, that could happen. But to cut a budget of the Auditor General so a specific audit or other audits don't happen because of the political fallout. Really? Retaliation led by bureaucrats who felt that they took a whacking from the AG and now they got a chance to return the favor? Again, I find that really, really hard to believe. But I find this whole thing hard to believe. That's why I say I'm trying to understand the motivation, because if we can understand the motivation, then maybe we can help unpack it or do it. But the problem is, even after 34 years in politics, I can't figure out what the motivation is unless this is just in the same category as the stupidity of giving millions of dollars to the Westons for nothing. Was it the same crowd of people with absolutely no political gut who let this get through? Is it incompetence? I have yet to have anybody give me a satisfactory motivation or understanding of what motivated the government to do this on the brink of an election, no less. So, the best I've got right now is part of it I still don't understand. There's a part of it maybe I'm hoping someday I will, because it just totally perplexes me. But if a mistake was made, which happens, we've all been in government. I'm looking at my colleagues. Mistakes happen. Then you run the biggest political mistake, and that's to double down on a losing hand. And that's what I see the government doing. We made a mistake. Rather than pay the political price of acknowledging we made a mistake and having to put our tail between our legs, we're going to double down. And that's what I'm seeing when I hear the minister responsible for this budget stand up in the House and want to talk about 2011, rather than a single justification for this. What's the justification for causing the Auditor General of Canada, for the first time in history, to tell Parliament, and remember, they're our employees, not Cabinet's employees, our employees. And our employee is telling us, Parliament, for the first time in our history, we don't have enough money in the Auditor General's budget to carry out our work plan. Now, you can slice and dice the letters and the issues and the way the minister's responding in the House, and you can parse that all you want. It does not change the fact that the Auditor General of Canada does not have enough money to do their work. And colleagues know, because I told you that at the end of every estimate meeting of public accounts, the chair of the committee ends the process. I did it. This chair does it. All the chair's predecessors and my predecessors. The last question you ask the Auditor General is, do you have sufficient money to carry out your work plan? Why do we ask that question that way? Because we're not part of the negotiations, because it's not independent, because we can't necessarily, as Parliament, trust the process explicitly because we're not part of it. It's more of this ridiculous business of the Executive Council, the Cabinet, over the years, usurping the power of Parliament. So this is no different than the Cabinet deciding how much money the clerk at the Supreme Court's going to get. Because they're completely different branches of government, and they're all equal. So we do have two big issues. One is the micro, one is the macro. Macro, I suspect, may not get changed now, although I'm going to get into it because there was a mandate to do it and there was pressure from the agents of Parliament as long ago as January, and this government has just ignored that and done nothing. And you know what? It wouldn't have been an issue. It's just not big enough to be an issue had this not happened. Then they could have got away with ignoring their promise in that area. They probably would have. Who would have brought that up in the context of all the things that are going on that are going to be part of the next election that you're all welcome to? So, I remain in trying to answer the question of funding in the next Parliament, which was to me the most important part of that question. Yeah, I hope that happens, but I got to tell you, the government, if this government is there, you're going to look bad, and if you're in opposition, you're going to look even worse, because the government of the day will make sure you do, and they're going to ride in on their white steed and save the day, to save it from a horrible scenario that this government created for no good reason, which is the essence of my point. Now, I was asked, Chair, by Mr. Whalen if I would consider some language.
I will.
Do I have a moment to?
Yes, you do. That's exactly what I was going to ask. I appreciate the goodwill amongst this committee in order to find a solution to this. I think we all realize that we aren't the ones drawing up the budgets, but we are here to help find solutions. And so if you want to take just a moment, maybe we can suspend just for a few moments, and I'll give you an opportunity to look at that. We'll suspend.
Great, thanks, Chair.
We have suspended for a few moments, and in that time, Mr. Christofferson has had the opportunity to look at some wording. Mr. Christofferson, I turn the floor back to you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I did, and I very much appreciate the efforts of Mr. Whalen, and in no way feel he's very sensitive to the fact that he's not a member of this committee, and he doesn't want to feel like he's coming in here and trying to be the one that shakes everything up. But I think any contribution to trying to get out of where we are, because we're looking for a resolution, is helpful and appreciated. And so I thank him for that. I have taken a look at the language, and it's helpful language. It's positive language. But Chair, for me, the politics of it is it's kind of the next step. It deals with what do we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and how going forward in terms of the funding.
Can I just interrupt? Because
Yeah.
the committee is not aware of any wording, would you be prepared to share what is
Yeah.
currently
Yeah.
either Mr. Whalen or Mr. Christofferson?
Mr. Whalen has to go
I'll
back,
just make
actually.
a point of order. So I didn't have this language in both official languages, so I wasn't able to share it, but I'll read what I do have in French. So it would be two resolutions. The first, that the committee recommend that funding to the Office of the Auditor General of Canada be increased annually to the cost of living inflation rate, and that the committee report this recommendation to the House. And in French, that's que le comité recommande que le
for the committee to recommend that the funding of the Auditor General of Canada be increased yearly on the basis of an inflation rate, and this recommendation be put to the House.
reconsider the allocation of funds as between officers of Parliament in order to ensure that the Auditor General is funded to undertake its vital performance of an audit on the government response to cybersecurity. Did I read that correct? Performance audit on the government response to cybersecurity.
Right.
Sure. The future government reconsider the allocation of funds as between officers of Parliament in order to ensure that the Auditor General is funded to undertake its vital performance audit on the government response to cybersecurity.
Thank you. I think we've all heard it. I'm going to go back to Mr. Christofferson. If you wanted to jump in on the same thing, Mr. Kelly, are you open to that?
Well, I don't know where you're going to go with this.
Well, I just, it looks like there's some puzzled.
Point of order then.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I do want to be clear about that. If that is that an amendment to his motion? Is this a new motion, or is this, is he simply on a point? Of order under the Sims protocol, sharing an idea.
Looking to see if this might unlock it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
If that's the case, then I'll leave the floor with Mr. Christofferson. And but if this is a motion, then I wish to speak to it.
Right. No, this is, my understanding now is that this is just a point of order with some more clarity. Go ahead, Mr. Christofferson.
No, I thank Mr. Kelly, and that's what I wanted to clarify was I was listening, but I didn't see anything there that kind of got us off the dime, and I was very, very straightforward with Mr. Whalen. I think I'm being open and honest. I never considered myself clever enough to pull off the alternative. So, I mean, if you ask what gets us out of this, just all I need, just as one member, but to shut me up for what it's worth, all I need is for the government to announce that the 10.8 million for the Auditor General will be there. I don't need mechanisms, I don't need time frames, but I need to hear that 10.8, and again, Mr. Whalen, your suggestion takes me a full circle back to the politics of this. How did we get into this? Like, if I was sitting over where you were, I'd be camped out in that minister's office wanting to know, why do I have this problem? Why is public accounts 2 weeks before we rise into a filibuster? Why was this necessary? What was the purpose? Now, I understand, I won't get into the detail, that it may have something to do with the agents of Parliament and how if one gets funded and it throws things out, and I understand that. I've been in government. I understand that problem. But two responses. Number one, the House Leader already had a mandate to fix this and didn't do it. There was a letter from the agents of Parliament in January of this year asking them to fix that funding mechanism. Had that funding mechanism been fixed and in place, I suspect that this whole process would have gone down a different road, and this wouldn't have happened. But that's not where we are yet. So there's two pieces in front of us. One is that for the first time, and I've got more stuff to read in here that underscores that this has never happened before. And it's this underfunding of the Auditor General that again, I'll keep coming back to it because there's an answer. I just can't find it.
Let me just, on the same principle here.
Sure.
I'm wondering what is in our ability as a Public Accounts Committee really to make a difference. If Mr. Whalen and Ms. Mendez and the government side is saying that we make the request, that we put forward a mechanism that, as a suggestion, because it's really going to take. It's going to take a executive level to say, okay, we're going to do this. We can't take a simple vote and now it's done this, right? I mean, it's going to take the executive branch to step up. So if we are willing to make a unanimous letter laying out exactly the problems as all parties, as all members of this committee see it, is that enough? Because, to be quite frank, how you've been there, you've done it. The wheels of government turn very slowly, right? And if we can get a unanimous letter suggesting this type of mechanism that would allow the Auditor General that ability, because we see money. This is not a time of austerity. We are not in a recession.
Exactly.
We have money for everything but this one.
Yeah.
And so if we as a Public Accounts Committee recognize that and make the request to the government, then is that sufficient enough? I mean, having the government side, the official opposition, and you, sir, signing a letter in unanimity showing exactly how the import that we put on this, would that be sufficient?
I'll be glad to take it under advisement. Again, here's my thinking, sir. I know as well as you and agree that getting government to change decisions and make decisions from the standing committee level is very difficult, like pushing string. But I've been around long enough to know, sir, that if the public turns on them on this issue, it'll be fixed real quick, because it's a lot more than a $10.8 million problem. And that's my purpose, is that as I started to say when I got here, a part of me is going to feel like a bit of a failure if I leave here after all these years on public accounts and all the fights and skirmishes we had to get information to make sure that we could do our job, and I leave and the work plan for the year after I leave has been devastated and gutted. Then I'm sorry, I cannot help but leave here feeling like I failed. Like really, after 15 years, and that was the condition that I walked away from the PAC and Auditor General work of Parliament. And whether or not that belongs on my shoulders or not, that's how I feel, and that's why I feel so passionately. So I know enough about politics to know that if enough people become aware of this, there will be outrage, and it would get changed. And I only stand a very small chance of using this little filibuster at the Public Accounts Committee as my means. And once I let go of that, I may have a letter that's signed unanimously by the committee, but had we done that from the very, very beginning, we might have a different process, but we didn't. And now the government's getting more and more entrenched, and my worry is that if I stop this filibuster, although I don't believe for a moment I can single-handedly change the world, I know that the ability to do that is impossible if I relinquish the floor.
I would argue that first of all that you are putting too much on your shoulders if you're saying that you failed, because you haven't. But secondly, if we can move in unanimity as the committee has in the last 4 years. Work together for the betterment of Canadian taxpayers, for helping departments, for making sure that they're, that they're transparent and accountable. If we can get that, that would give us way as a committee also to finish off our reports next week and the important work on the legacy document that we have to complete next week. So I'll cede to Ms. Mendez under the understanding we go back to Mr. Christopherson.
It is precisely about the legacy report, and I think that's where we, as a committee, could leave a mark, a special and lasting legacy. And it is precisely on the mechanisms of funding for all officers of Parliament, not just for the Auditor General. And we've had this conversation. We've agreed that they shouldn't be a decision of Cabinet. They should be a decision of Parliament, that officers of Parliament should be the oversight should be in Parliament, not with Cabinet. So we've agreed on that, I think, and it should be part of our report. It should be the part of the legacy we, as a committee, leave for whomever comes after us.
Which is the first recommendation in the legacy report.
Exactly. So while I understand while Mr. Christopherson is so outraged about this, I would like to put on the record that the government has reinstated funding. As of last year, $8 million a year for 5 years that were added to the budget of the Auditor General. And that last year, for example, they didn't even spend the whole budget. There were $2 million left on the table. So the planning that you tell me that they've gutted because they don't have the funds, we don't know really how many reports they're going to do. Right now on the website, yes, there's only one for the fall and two for the winter, but that's clearly not all that they're going to do, because that's what they usually do. They only put 2 or 3 in the website, and then eventually they develop another work plan. So I think we're okay. I understand completely what you're saying. I start with the premise that it shouldn't be Cabinet that decides what the budget of the Auditor General is. That's my starting premise. But right now, I can tell you that we won't solve this issue. We won't get those $10 million back. Or back? No, not even back. To what they asked. They are getting $8 million a year over 5 years, every year. So it's a 12% increase every year. And that's what they are getting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson.
No, thanks, Chair. A couple of things. You can see, I think the government would likely vote for a unanimous letter because it would allow this to move on, and they could stick handle much easier a letter than they could a filibuster. Well, that's my take on it, and that's just it. I'm only exercising my rights. And I would also point out to my colleague that it was the Auditor General that said specifically that cybersecurity couldn't be afforded to be done. Now, if the government wants to challenge the legitimacy of what the Auditor General is saying, I am more than willing to agree that we bring the Auditor General back in front of the cameras and let's have it out. I'd love that. If that's what what the committee would like to do, to sort of get to the bottom of it. If the government believes, as strongly as I do, that the funding is adequate and that this is consistent with the way governments have treated the Auditor General before, if the government members actually believe that, as strongly as I believe the opposite, let's bring the Auditor General in front of the cameras and let's have at her. So I'm open to a Sims protocol response to that. Let's get the Auditors General in here and stop, if you want to not deal with debate and deal with facts, let's bring them in. Is the government member, are they open to that, Chair?
I wouldn't have any trouble. The problem is that I do want to finish the 4 reports we have. That's my only concern.
Well, you know what? If you're willing to bring in the Auditor General, I'm willing to negotiate what the rest of the sitting looks like. I mean, my goal is, and here's the thing. Here's my real problem, Chair, and it was exactly what what you said, Madame Mendez, when you said basically that the funding is not going to happen, that look, the bottom line is this is not going to happen. And my position is it bloody well is. And I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen, even if it's, you know, David and Goliath, David's still going to fight. And so it seems to me, Chair, we're quite a ways from a resolution. Because what I would really need, to be clear, I would need to know that not only is this committee unanimously supporting that, but that that's going to do something with the government. And I've been around a long time. I can keep secrets, QTs, winks, like give the guy. I'd be more than willing to give the government whatever face saver. I offer this publicly. I will work with the government publicly and privately to do everything I can to help create a face saver where this is easier to stand down from. I don't care. I don't need headlines. It's the opposite of what I want. I'm trying to fade into the distance, and you keep pushing me into a fight. I would love to get this resolved and go back to new Serene Dave rather than bringing this guy back. But,
all right. So, and you know what? We long for the new Serene Dave to happen.
You know,
and
that's
so,
the goal.
And so, what I'm trying to do is hear all sides and then find a solution. And so I'm not so certain that we're going to get the wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to do this. But would we be willing to meet on a third day in the next week? Submit or not submit, but invite the Auditor General to come to a meeting, because that next Tuesday, and I realize that this can go into Tuesday and we can miss our reports, which I don't use that as a hammer, but I think all of us want our reports finished. So if we can today, say two things: a letter, one, a meeting with the Auditor General, either next week or the following week, but it would be a third meeting. It may be outside the normal meeting time. And then from there, I can't speak on behalf of the government. So this would give us a letter asking the government unanimously from our committee, asking the government for this. Secondly, it would be an invitation to the Auditor General to come next week or the following week to that meeting. And then Mr. Christofferson, after that, I can't speak on the response. None of us really can wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah,
I don't even think the government side can do that. So a suggestion.
Yeah. I'm not hearing anything that I couldn't work with as an idea. I think the wording of the letter would probably require some time. And just on the reports, and I appreciate that, because obviously you're all smart people. You would have thought through, as I did, okay, if I start doing this, what am I going to face? And one of the first things I'm going to get from respected colleagues like Alexandra Mendez is, hey, this is all fine, Dave, it's important, but what about the committee reports that we have to get done? They're important. And I weighed that out. And for me, for what it's worth, I concluded that this is so big that the work we do has three key points that really change things. Number one is when the report is tabled from the Auditor General. It's a whole day. We do the lockup, the media. It usually controls the media cycle for the next 24 hours, longer if there's a big problem. That's one. The second one is when we hold our hearing. It's public, the media are at least aware, often they're covering it, but certainly people who are interested are watching. That has an impact. The third one is our committee report. And it makes a difference, but I'm arguing that the other two are more important, and on the reports that we have, we've done those two parts. So I'm looking at not being able to finish the third part of a couple of items versus not even having the report tabled or a hearing because no audit exists. And so to
this
me,
is probably a good
in the higher, just a minute, you got to learn your timing. I'm friendly, but don't cut me off. But in the hierarchy of things, in my mind, as much as it's tragic, I think that the trade-off was worth it. And on the legacy piece, I have offered a process, and I think we could get around that if we needed to. But that's my thinking on the reports.
So on the letter, because your concern is the wording of the letter, if you, sir, and Madam Mendez and Mr. Kelly, so there's the three vice chairs and the lead critic, if they were to work with, our analyst to draft the letter, would that suffice? And I know that, the problem is, when we get whips involved and everybody else. I mean, I just want the three of you guys sitting down and putting in a letter that everyone can live with, and certainly you, because this is contingent on, I think, your satisfaction that the letter properly addresses what we want to accomplish here.
Point of order. I think we can sweeten the pot for Mr. Christofferson a little bit, and that's if he agrees to move now into committee report consideration, so that over the course of the week until Tuesday, the next regularly scheduled meeting, the letter can be discussed. The order of business on Tuesday can begin with the consideration of that letter. In case he's not satisfied, at least then he'll get the floor back on this item. It's sort of like another Sims protocol olive branch, just so that he appreciates that he's not surrendering anything, but it does allow us to get 45 good minutes on the report consideration.
So I do not. One thing that I think would be a real stumbling block would be if we brought the letter for the committee to begin wordsmithing all over again. I would much rather, I think the committee has to see it, but I would really much rather have the three work on the letter, draft the letter, and then send the letter so that we can get timely response from the Auditor General's office. Mr. Christofferson, I'm not sure if the olive branch scenario, it puts it off today, and but I do think it is a solution. Whether it's a full solution, I don't know, but it is a way forward. A way forward.
No, and I very much appreciate that, and I'm trying to think. And what I do like is the suggestion, the last suggestion by Mr. Whalen gives me some time to think and to see whether the letter, because again, as much as the government members would like this to go away, I want it to stay here because it's the only way we're going to get any change. And what I would be banking on, again, I do everything out in the open, what I would be banking on, and I'm saying to my fellow opposition colleagues, is a unanimous letter from the committee that's clear and strong about how we feel about this as the Public Accounts Committee, combined with a hearing where we get the Auditor General to talk to Canadians. And the question is, how does that stack up as pressure? Because that's what, for me, it's the resolution is not peace in the committee as much as I want that too. That's not my resolution. It is yours, sir, and I understand that. That's your mandate. But my purpose is beyond that, and it's to get that money allocated. And everything we're talking about is short of that. So I think that let me reiterate the suggestion that's been made so I understand it and say it in my words. And if that's the case, then maybe we've got an agreement that'll let us move forward. The suggestion is that we, at the conclusion of my remarks, if we're in agreement with what I'm saying, and I've got it right, then we would switch into committees report writing.
Right now, we would move to the legacy report document.
Okay.
And Tuesday, we have three other reports. We have the call.
RCMP?
Oh, the RCMP draft report is ready. That's right.
Yeah, also, Heritage Property, no, the other one,
Data, call centers?
Asylum Seekers.
Asylum seekers.
Before you go on how many reports will be ready for Tuesday, if we actually just agree on getting the Auditor General back, it will have to be Tuesday, so, or ideally, no?
Or a different day.
That's if we're going to pick up Tuesday as to where we go, if Thursday would be the earliest, wouldn't it?
Sorry?
So
Well, today's
what
Thursday. Tuesday, we would decide whether or not we've got a meeting to happen.
Okay, so we would wait
According
until...
to Mr. Whalen,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I
okay.
appreciate.
Go-
And that's
go
one of the things
ahead.
I was going to articulate was, because if we keep talking, we're going to waste the opportunity to do that work, and I want that work done too. So what's being suggested is that I would stand down my control of the floor right now and agree that we would go into committee reports, in this case it'd be the legacy report. Between now and next Tuesday, myself, Madame Mendez, the chair, Mr. Kelly, and our researchers would sit down and try to come to an agreement on a letter that we would then collectively recommend to the committee.
So yes, the letter would be, what we would have to decide, I guess, probably, we first send the invitation to the Auditor General, but that's one piece of correspondence that has to leave. The other one would be either probably to the President of the Treasury Board or to Finance Minister. I'm not sure which one. Budget is finance, so undoubtedly CC to President. Probably, yeah, I'm to the department anyway, to the Deputy Minister or to the Minister. You know, and that would be just spelling out exactly what Mr. Whalen and all people would come up with.
Yeah, so again, if we worked on that letter and assuming we had agreement that the letter worked, and that we did confirm, because we've got time now to confirm that the Auditor General could come in for Thursday. The whole purpose of waiting till Tuesday was to give me that time rather than having to make and as an old negotiator from the auto worker days in the 70s, you try not to make too many snap decisions in negotiations, so a little time to think would be good. I think there's the possibility. I'm not committing ahead of time that it's a done deal and we just have to pro form it. It's really going to depend, and I'm going back and forth. But I do think that's a positive way, and as long as it's understood that Tuesday I get the floor, and the first thing I will be able to say, I will be given the opportunity to say, yes, we have an agreement and we can move forward on that, or no, we don't have an agreement, and I just launch in again.
So
is that the understanding?
We can even put a motion to the floor to that respect.
I think the chairs, I trust the chair.
I will,
totally.
yeah, I'll do that. Again, you know, it's coming from the committee, so it's important that all the committee hear the letter. But I'm putting confidence in Ms. Mendez, Mr. Christofferson, and Mr. Kelly, and our staff here to come up with a letter that we just cannot afford to have wordsmithed over and over and over again when that Tuesday comes, because that takes away goodwill, to be quite honest. So do we have a consensus on that? I see government, Mr. Kelly?
Yes, I do. If I may, though, another point of order, I guess, under our protocol, I want to suggest that when the invitation is sent to the Auditor General to appear, can we not also invite the Deputy Minister of Finance to come for an explanation? I mean, this is what. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't. Thank you. Then
Bring them both in.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. when the
Okay, yeah,
deputy
I
minister
took
was
it.
for
I
him
took
to
it that
come.
you said should the letter go to.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank-
I think we would opt for.
And I would, hopefully the whole 2 hours with both sides there, and we can ask our questions and see if we can get to the bottom of it. At least we'd have a common starting point, because we're starting now, and I'm the first one to suggest this, we're starting to get off into rhetoric. And moving far away from, well, that's the nature of filibusters.
All right, so moving on then, do we have agreement? Do I hear a consensus on this?
So,
move
Chair,
forward?
just to be clear, then
Yes, you will get the floor.
I
on
will get the
Tuesday.
floor, but you're going to work with the clerk to confirm that we can get the deputy and the AG for next Thursday and have that information for Tuesday.
So, I'm not sure I want to be that specific. That's why I mentioned we may have to have a third meeting next week.
Yes, okay, fair enough, but a meeting-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think
All right.
that was the main thing. Is that I don't want to say Tuesday. It looks like we got a deal, and we haven't asked the AG if they can come or not. Because my enemy is the clock. This house is going to rise in a couple of weeks, and we need to get this done.
The invite can go the invite. I'm told
That's
will
what I
go
was
this
asking. Was
afternoon.
we could do it today.
The invite's going today, sir.
Yep.
Okay.
The invite will go today.
So, a chair, would you please repeat back to me what you think is going to happen? Let me understand it.
Well, as I understand it, and I'll again have my analyst or my clerk remind me if there's anything else, that should we have a way forward here, that we would then suspend this meeting. We would go in camera, work on our legacy document. On Tuesday, we would come back where the letter has been, the invitation has gone out and the letter has been drafted. And we would then have to get a consensus from the group to send it forward. Otherwise, it may just go from the three individuals. And we do that Tuesday. We would go into our draft reports that we have on Tuesday if we're still going forward. And if not, we cede the floor back to you on your motion again. Then we, depending on what day the Auditor General and the Deputy Minister may come, then we plan on that meeting as well, whether it's a Thursday or a Wednesday or the following week or whatever. There's other areas where I see there could be a fall, right? So I wonder what happens, to be quite honest, if the Auditor General is willing to come, but the Deputy Minister isn't.
Well, let's take it one
What
step at a
happens
time.
if, the Auditor General can't come when we can meet? So there's this is in good faith that we're moving forward. I think even the government side, opposition, yourself, we're all moving forward in good faith. So I can't, I can't say this is going to go off like clockwork, but I think we have a good solution here and a goodwill. I want to keep adding from all members of the committee.
Yeah, sorry,
Christopherson.
Madam Clerk?
Yep.
She's anxiously trying to get in.
Yes, I'd just like to minute this as a unanimous decision of the committee.
Right.
First, and then when I send the invites, the committee's motion can be included in it, which gives the invite the support of the committee more strongly.
And the context.
And the context.
Yeah, the context. So what has been said here about inviting the Deputy Minister of Finance and the Auditor General to discuss the issue that we've been discussing. So it will be very clear to everybody once they get the invitation what they're going to be talking about.
Mr. Christopherson.
Okay, yeah, I would just avoid a motion if we can, because I could see us getting lost in it. But if that's the way you want to go, fine. That's why I was looking for an understanding, but if you need something to convey, that's fine too. Let's give it a shot. I mean, hope springs eternal.
Yep.
I still like to believe, I could be wrong, but I still like to believe that the government members are working in the background trying to make this go away, because it's a lot more than $10.8 million worth of problem. Anyway, yeah, let's give it a shot and see if we can't work together to affect the change we need.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Seeing no other hands, we will suspend and come back in 1 minute to look at our legacy report. We will then move in camera.